Hello everyone, welcome to part 9 of this mini series about project control, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about forecasting. Now, forecasting is quite a complex topic about trying to predict the future, trying to predict how much we're going to make or how much we're going to spend. And this is by far not an exhaustive description, but rather just give you an idea of the importance of forecasting. Start with the definition. Forecasting is an estimate or prediction of conditions and events in the project future based on information and knowledge available at the time of the forecast. Information is based on the project's past performance and expected future performance, and includes information that could impact the project in the future, such an estimate at completion and estimate to complete. So one of the important things here to know is that indeed we use the information we have available at the time of doing our forecast. But many things are not predictable, and that does not mean our forecast is going to be super accurate. There's many events that we could not predict would happen, and therefore they will affect our forecasts. But for most of the cases, it is better to do a forecast than not to do a forecast at all. So there's a couple of terms we need to know before we move on. Budget at completion, or BAC, I spoke about it in a previous video. This is the sum of all the budgets established for the work to be performed, and basically how much I plan to actually spend by the time of completing the project. Estimate to complete, or ETC, is the expected cost to finish all the remaining project work. In other words, I achieved so far in 2 months, I spend a certain amount. How much money more do I need to finish my project? And estimate at completion is actually the expect the total cost of completion, all work expressed as the sum of all the actual costs to date and the estimate to complete. So here the difference is that compared to the previous one, is that on the previous one I'm not taking into consideration the cost of all the work that I already did. So this is the sum of all the work that I already did and the sum of the work that still needs to be done. But I will get into the calculations in a little bit. So project forecasting basically answers the question, how will the project really end? And here there's many different types of forecast we can do. For example, if you're doing a forecast for schedule forecast, then you do this with the critical path analysis, and you try to understand if things are going well or if some tasks need to be adapted. During planning, the estimate for as well of the total project cost is the budget, as we know, and we calculate our BAC, or our budget at completion. But during the project itself, some of the assumptions might have to be revisited and rechecked, and estimates might have to be revised, and therefore the total projects need to be recalculated, and we would have our EAC, our estimate costs that we would have to complete the project. So the EAC includes actual costs and estimated costs, okay? And therefore the EAC will always be the actual cost plus the estimated total cost, okay? So in terms of schedule performance index, this is another concept that is interesting to know, because basically it's a measure of the schedule efficiency expressed as a ratio of the earned value to the planned value. And so we call this index the SPI, and the SPI will be the earned value divided by the planned value. Now, if this ratio is greater than 1, that means the project is accelerating compared to the plan. But if it is less than 1, it means that it's underperforming as compared to the plan. The cost performance index is very similar, but it's a measure of the cost efficiency of budget resources expressed as a ratio of earned value to actual cost. So the formula of the CPI is earned value divided by actual cost. Now, what does that mean? If this ratio is more than 1, it means the project is underrunning, so we're spending less. If this ratio is more than 1, it means that the project is overrunning. There's 4 different ways of calculating our EAC, and those 4 different ways are pretty much all based on the same formula, that the EAC is equal to actual cost plus the ETC, but there are 4 different approaches. The first one tells us that EAC will be equal to our actual costs plus our new estimates for the remaining work. Okay, so we have to recalculate estimates for the rest of the work that must be done. And this is based upon what has happened to the project, and we create a completely new estimate for any work that still has to be done. Okay, so this one gives a very realistic budget, but the problem is it requires a lot of work to be done. Now, method 2 is a little bit more simpler, and it says that the EAC, okay, will be equal to the actual cost plus the BAC minus, or budgeted computation, minus the earned value. Okay, so what does this mean? It means that we are using the original planned cost for the remaining work is unchanged, and therefore all we're doing is switching with how much we have actually earned so far. So this one is very easy to do, but the problem is, again, is not very realistic in terms, in my opinion, of what will happen in the future, but it's another method that can be used. Now, method 3, on the other hand, takes a little bit into more consideration the trend of how the cost is going. So it's very similar to the previous formula, but we divide the BAC minus EV, and we divide it by our CPI, our cost performance index. And this basically what it means is that it will take into consideration the trends that have occurred so far in the cost to complete the work of the project. And we consider that, okay, if we've been underperforming so far in the project, then the rest of the project we will continue underperforming. If we've been performing very well so far, we're going to keep on performing very well as well. So this one can be, it's easy to calculate if you have the data, obviously, but at the same time it can give quite a realistic as well prediction. So therefore I think it can be a very good alternative to method 1. The last method is a little bit more complicated, okay? So instead of dividing simply by the CPI, we divide it by the CPI multiplied by the SPI. So not only we take into consideration the cost evolution or our cost performance, but we also take into consideration our schedule performance. So the cost of the remaining work will be influenced by trends in terms of completing the project on time and in terms of costs. Now this one once again can be a very good alternative to method 1, and if you have the data, and therefore it can be very interesting. But I only use this one when a schedule is a main component, or it's one of the primary baselines or one of the primary constraints of the project. So what does this mean? We've seen this graph before, obviously, and it basically means that keeping on with this graph, what we try to do is to predict, all right, if we are here, all right, this is how much we actually spend. And now, for example, we want to know where are we actually going to be? Are we going to keep this trend, or are we going to be able to catch up and maybe spend less than what we thought? And this is what we really need to focus on when trying to make forecasts, is what is the forecast that is most realistic. Now, so for example, what we have here, all right, so the ETC, so during the project, is the estimate to complete over here. So this is giving us our estimate to complete, but actually the estimate at completion would be up here. We actually predict that we're going to spend more than our initial project budget for a variety of reasons, okay? And therefore, this is how the terms would line up in terms of this graph. So what we would have here as well at the end, the difference between the budget at completion and the EAC, this difference over here that you see, this is our variance of the cost, and therefore obviously in this case it's bad because it's showing that we did a positive, we overrun the costs. So to summarize, there's many different ways of forecasting indeed our project, some of them simpler, some of them demand more work, but it is important that we create those forecasts to have an idea if how our performance at the end of the project will be. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you on the next video of this mini series.